everyone. Welcome to the Find a Moment podcast, where we navigate the space between ideals and everyday life. We are your hosts, Gretchen Roberts and Jennifer Ford, and we look forward to finding a moment with you today.
Welcome back. We are going to jump into the third episode of our series on education. And in this episode, we're going to be exploring ideas surrounding education in adulthood. And we'll be talking about that as our kids move into adulthood themselves, but also for us as parents and as unique people. What does education look like as we continue to live and learn and grow? And we're just glad that you've chosen to find a moment with us today. We hope you enjoy it. Well, our next segment is discussing what that looks like as an adult. And I don't have experience launching young people into adulthood, but you do. And I would imagine that some of those teen things also kind of apply. The idea of letting them make their own mistakes, figuring out what your level of tolerance is for how hands-off or hands-on you are, and how much tolerance you have for what mistakes they may make, or what's the cost of those mistakes. That also has some influence there. But in terms of education and young adults, what are some of the things that come to your mind? Because obviously there's things like education if they choose to go to college, and moving into adulthood if they are going to have their own apartment or whatever, things like that. They've got their own job. But then also figuring out how much do you need to know, and how much do they want you to know, and kind of learning how to let go of some of those areas. I think all of parenting is this releasing and letting go of things, particularly as they move into high school and beyond. But you are the person on this podcast with the experience in that department. So I'd love to hear what you have to share on that.
Yes, I feel like I'm just at the beginning stages, and I feel like that's another important reason to connect and have friendship with people who are ahead of you, because there's so much wisdom in parents and people who have gone before you and have children older than mine, to hear their experience and to learn from them. So a lot of what I've learned has been from people who have gone before me, and I'm so grateful for those relationships. So I feel like I'm kind of in the midst of figuring out what that looks like. But I will say the first thing that came to mind when you asked about that was how with our adult children, we end up sending each other a lot of articles and books, and read this, what do you think of it? Read this, what do you think about this? And then it opens up the door for them to send me recommendations. And so with one of my sons, I was, asking him what he had been reading. And so he told me all about this book and kind of how it's changed his thoughts on a lot of things. And he wasn't sure if I would like it. So I was like, well, of course I'm going to read it. And so I read it, and just having those conversations. So it's another way of, like we talked about with understanding who your children are, it's understanding, what they are reading and how that's affecting them. And then you entering into that and reading something that's maybe out of your comfort zone or out of what you would normally read or want to read, but then having that connection with them and being able to discuss it. So we do a lot of book sharing and article sharing and discussing those kind of things. And for me also, it's having thoughts that and ideas that are different from mine. And, they are not made to be cookie cutters of their dad and me. They are made to be their own unique individual self. So, and they're going to have a different purpose and role in this world than I have. And so how they are being equipped in that. So a lot of it is kind of entering into what they're doing. And then there's also a lot of practical things like budget making and navigating financial aspects of adulthood, the, education, like you said, university studies, higher level education. There's a lot to navigate with them, and really asking a lot of questions. One of the questions I I think I probably ask the most is, how can I help you? And I think that that kind of opens the door for them to know, hey, I'm here to help. I want to help. And I want to know what you specifically need help with. Because a lot of times what I think they want help with, they got that. They want help with other things. So that's initially how we've been navigating those adult years or young adult years. But I definitely feel like I am just in the beginning stages. It almost feels like how you do when you come home with a newborn or you enter into the toddler years and you're like, oh, this is a whole different thing. How do I do this? That's kind of what it's like going into these adult years of, oh, wow, this is not what I've been doing for the past 18 years. So I need help.
I think that just speaks to maybe part of the Lord's greater purpose for us through marriage and parenting, these beautiful things that He's created for us to live in and live through. And yet, oh, how they hasten our dependence on Him, and
Hmm.
oh, how they sanctify us. I don't think there's ever a season or stage of marriage or parenting that isn't revealing parts of ourselves that we have to lay at the cross and say,
Yes.
Lord, I give this up. This isn't, you're showing me more and more of who I am that does not match what you are calling me to be. And so I choose to surrender this, and I want you to put in me something clean and new so that I can be the parent, the wife, the mom, whoever so that I can be that for these people in
Hmm.
my life who I love. It takes so much humility to listen. Of course, we encounter this online probably more than anything, but I think people typically have relationships kind of in their inner circle. You know, there's your family and then your inner circle. Those people tend to sort of align for the most part with your own values. And when you have young adult children or teen children who start to kind of cultivate their own unique set of values and perspectives and things that they think are okay and not okay. And when you're having a relationship with somebody like that whose values start to not align with your own, it takes so much humility to lean in and to listen. And it takes grit to do that. And it takes restraint, and it takes prioritizing the relationship over what you think is right. And I think sometimes in parenting, it's really tempting to think, if my child's not valuing what I've taught them to value or what I've tried to teach them to value, that means that I've done something wrong. And then that kind of triggers this defensiveness in us. And then we respond emotionally out of that defensiveness in a way that creates division instead of unity with that relationship. So it just takes humility. Like your willingness, when you told me about that story about the book, your willingness to get the book, to read it, to discuss it, to interact with it, and to then interact with that child, about that adult child, about those ideas in that book. It really set a good example for me that more than anything, they're going to want us to listen. And it may be that those ideals in that book are things that person comes to really embrace more and more as they mature. They may be things where, as they gain more life experience, they look back at that and they say, wow, this doesn't align with my life experience. And yet my mom knew that, and she was willing to read it and listen and talk to me about it. And she respected me in my thoughts and in my
Hmm.
beliefs at that time. Wow. So for that to be something that an adult child can look back on and say, I remember when I was thinking this, I read this, I shared this, I knew that my parents didn't think this way, and yet they still chose to engage in it with me in a way that was respectful and honoring. That sets such a beautiful precedent for them as they move into parenting their own family one day, if that's what the Lord chooses for them. But that story really stuck with me when you shared it with me a while back, and I thought,
Mm.
okay, this is what we have to do. I think beyond that too is just this idea all throughout their raising children, but especially I would imagine having to kind of step back and watch your children move into adulthood and independence, is trusting that the Lord is faithful to write their stories, that He
Hmm.
cares more about them than we ever could imagine. And if God was faithful in my life, and if He if it's possible for him to have done all of the transformation and all the things that he has done in my life, why would I think that he's not capable of doing that in the life of my own adult children?
Hmm.
He certainly can. He's more than able. And so that just requires a lot of surrender and open-handedness and a long view of the future. Just like with
Right.
every stage of parenting, you are doing it for the long-term investment, as my mom always says. Jennifer, you are a long-term investment. It took a long time for those dividends to pay off. And I say, Mom, I know. Thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for keeping on making deposits
Yes.
because you're not wrong. But having the long view of the relationship and stewarding things in a way that is mindful of that and prioritizing the future over being right and
Mm,
um,
that is so good.
and recognizing, yeah, and recognizing when you're feeling triggered, recognizing those feelings of defensiveness or disappointment or whatever it is, keeping those things internal and making sure that you're processing that maybe with your husband or your spouse or a close friend, and not allowing that to go outward to that child where that frustration could do damage.
Hmm. It's so good.
I've been so grateful to have an up close view of you and your journey as you walk through those older years with your kids, because
Hmm.
that's, so much of what I've witnessed in you has influenced. It's kind of prepared me. What you're going through is preparing me for my future in a lot of ways. And I think, like you said, everybody needs somebody that's several steps ahead.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that everything's going to be exactly the same in your own family as it is in that friend's family, but God has certainly provided through your experiences to help me feel just feel more confident and more prepared, more than anything to seek the Lord's guidance just
Hmm.
in every step of raising our kids and to have that long view for sure.
Right. It is
For sure.
definitely a marathon,
That
not
is
a
so true.
sprint for sure, right?
Right.
So, in thinking about education, we've kind of talked about the younger years, the teen years, young adult children. And so, what does it look like? It makes me think about us as seasoned adults. And
Seasoned.
what does education look like for us? Like, how are we
Mm.
continuing our education? So, what does that look like for you in this seasoned adult phase of life?
Mm. I think education could go in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's in the direction of things that we're passionate about, like our giftings. Whether for me as a musician, it can move in that direction. It can also be things that are spiritual, and I think our spiritual education is something that we should be taking responsibility for on an ongoing basis. That is nobody's responsibility to feed you but you, and God gave you a mind and
Mm,
resourcefulness, and you are at this time and place in the world and in all the ages where we have access to more than any other generation that's ever lived. And so it really is our responsibility. I think having quick and easy access to so much information and so many resources, because it's so readily available, it can also be easy to delay. And so we'll say, oh, I have time for that later. I'll just listen to that podcast in the car. Oh, I'll just do that Bible study next month. And really, I think we should have a more intentional approach to our spiritual education. And that doesn't mean you have to be in a scheduled Bible study all the time and you have to be reading the Bible in a 1 year, plan every year. But it does mean take responsibility, and it doesn't mean go to church on Sunday and that's enough, because it's not the pastor's job to feed you and teach you and raise you. It is your job to take responsibility for your spiritual needs. There's also, whether you're educating yourself on how to prepare for the next season of life with your spouse, or if you are single, learning how to prepare yourself so that you are able to provide and do whatever is needed for yourself and your family in that next season. And that can come through relationships or books, or there's a variety of options there. But sometimes education is also professional in nature, and I happen to be moving in a different direction with that now that both of the girls will be doing their school full time in other places. This will be the first time that I'm really jumping back into the professional world. And so I'm taking classes right now that will move me in that direction. And that can be really fulfilling too, because
Mm.
my profession, my career, I'm not getting a cash paycheck for it, but my career for the past 16 years has been raising my kids. And I'll still be doing that, but that has really been, I would say, 99% of my focus. And so the idea of transitioning into something professional is exciting. And I think it freaks my kids out a lot because they have been so used to me being available all the time. And I want to remain available. That's why I've made some of the choices that I have with this. But once they start school, they'll be gone more and they won't notice.
Mhm.
But professional education is something else. And then educating yourself, thinking too about our first episode in our identity podcast. We were talking about knowing ourselves so that we can
Mhm.
love others well. Just knowing what you need, being in tune to what you need, like what type of education you're needing at the time. Sometimes we need to be better educated about how to take care of ourselves physically.
Mm.
Sometimes we're on the front edge of looking towards our older years. Our bodies start to change. We can't see as well as we used to see. We need to get our readers, or
Yes.
or maybe our the first thing you notice is like your grip strength starts to decline, or you grunt when you go from sitting to standing. Like those are things that, or maybe you're hot at night. Those things or your body's way of saying, I need you to study me and understand what I need right now. And so
Mhm.
being in tune to that, because that translates into your ability to care for others well. Because if
Mhm.
if you're physically unwell, you are hindered, and feeling physically unwell takes up mental space, and it erodes your emotional capacity for frustration and things like that. And so sometimes educating yourself as an adult means paying attention to what your body physically needs as well.
Yes.
I'm probably missing something. Tell me what I'm missing. What
No,
else?
that is
What do you think?
so good and so comprehensive. I love it and inspiring. I'm like, oh, what am I going to read about next?
Oh,
I
well, you just did some education,
I did.
like that's kind of professional.
I just finished my nutrition and healthy living certification.
Woo.
So yeah, we'll talk about that probably in another series coming up. But and in doing that, I realized like just how much I enjoy like a class and you know and reading and studying and man, it is invigorating for me. And so I think finding what you want to learn about that is
Mhm.
exciting for you. Like maybe it's a household project that you're going to research and, figure out how to install something or build something. And, I think there's so many things to learn and do, and to see which one of those kind of energizes you and excites you. And I think that we are made with a natural curiosity, like, and so not letting that just be put in a box of school years, but to really be open to being curious and, learning about all the things. And I think it definitely keeps us young, you could say, but I think it just keeps us engaged with other people and it gives us things to talk about with people for sure. I mean, I think the more you read about different things and study different things, there is someone who needs to be encouraged with what you read, whether it's a scripture that you have been pondering in the Psalms, or if it's a book you've been reading, like you said, about health or aging or things like that. Like there is someone in your life who probably would benefit from you asking them questions and sharing what you have learned with them. Yeah, I think that there's always something to be curious about and to learn. And I love how you talked about just the different areas of us because we do have, a mind and a body and a spirit and relationships. And it reminds me of my rule of life because my rule of life is
Mm.
based on all of those categories. And so we need to tend to all of those areas and kind of educate ourselves in all of those areas. So I love how you brought that full circle. We hope you have enjoyed sharing this series on education with us, just starting with our ideals and moving through school age children and adult children and even ourselves as adults. We hope that you have gleaned some helpful information and been inspired through this series. We are so excited in our next episode to introduce you to one of our friends, Jenny Nelson. We will have a moment with Jenny, and so we hope you will join us then and meet another new friend.